Hello everyone, this is Minister Dante Fordson. Today I'm going to be talking to you about animal-human hybrids, transhumanism, and the Bible. And in this session, we are going to answer 4 different questions related to this subject. The first question is, what are animal-human hybrids? The second question, what is transhumanism? The third question, what do they have to do with the Bible, if anything? And the fourth question is, how does it affect us as Christians?
And a bipartisan effort by Senator Sam Brownback and Senator Mary Landrieu. They have introduced the Human-Animal Hybrid Prohibition Act of 2009, which will, quote, ban the creation of animal-human hybrids. I didn't even know we needed that, but I think this is the first thing I've seen Congress do in a long time that I agree with.
Now let's jump right into answering the first question. What are animal-human hybrids? Well, animal-human hybrids until recently was something that was relegated to the realm of what people usually refer to as mythology. And a lot of the times in the ancient text you would read about these creatures that people considered to be mythological. They were part human and part animal of some kind. And even today we have records of these before we even get into the modern times. We have the Minotaur, who was part bull, part man. We have the satyr, who was part goat, part man. And we have the centaurs, who were part horse and part man. Even in Egypt, one of the biggest monuments that we see on our planet, and many people don't think of it as an animal-human hybrid, but it is the Sphinx. The Sphinx was part lion, and some people believe part woman or even part man. This was an animal-human hybrid. And so as we come into our modern times, people are trying to recreate these, but we'll get into that later. So that is the first question. An animal-human hybrid is a creature that is not fully human and not fully animal, but partly both. Now the second question is, what is transhumanism? Transhumanism may sound like a new term to you, but basically what it is, it's the scientific study of trying to become more than human. It's a combination of the words transcend and human. And so what they want to do is transcend what it means to be human. You're very familiar with this concept from comic books and movies. It's the concept of a superhero-like person, such as Superman, who can fly like, we'll just say a bird, or he has supervision or super strength. Science is actively pursuing what they call the transhuman, or the next level in our human evolution. So that's the answer to the second question. A transhuman is a human that supersedes what is known to be a normal human. Now the third question is, what do these animal-human hybrids and what does transhumanism have to do with the Bible? And we're going to answer that question right now before we get to the fourth question. And when we finally get to the fourth question, which is how does this affect us as Christians, we're going to go over some of the things that are going on in modern times that may soon come to affect both our spiritual and physical decisions that we may have to make. So for now, let's answer this third question. What does transhumanism and what do animal-human hybrids have to do with the Bible? To answer the question about animal-human hybrids, we're going to be looking at only 4 different types of hybrids mentioned in the Bible. There are actually more than 4, but there are 4 animal-human hybrids actually mentioned by name in the Bible. So we're going to look at those 4. And the first one that we're going to look at is called the shed. Now, if you're not familiar with this term, it is because you have not looked in the Hebrew. If you refer to the Hebrew text using a Strong's Concordance, which I suggest everyone gets, one of the creatures that you will come across is called the shed. And when you do some research into the shed, you find out that it's not only in the Bible, it's actually pops up in Assyria and Babylon. It is a creature that they worship. Now in our Bible, it is simply interpreted to the English word devils or demons, depending on which version you are reading. But there are 2 different words in the Hebrew that are translated as demon or devils, and we'll get to those. But what we're going to do right now is just look at the shed. And the shed is an interesting creature. You may want to take notes. The notes will pop up on the video. I'm just going to talk. So feel free to take notes as we go along. You should see pictures and all kinds of stuff popping up on the video as I go along. So the first animal is called the shed. And we actually run across the shed first in Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 17. Now that verse reads, "They sacrificed unto devils," there the word is shed in Hebrew, "not to God, to gods whom they knew not, to new gods that came newly up, whom your fathers feared not." So these shed Moses referred to as new gods that came newly up. And the word there he used is chadash or chadash, which is a Hebrew word which means a new thing or something new. So whatever these were, these weren't there before, and he mentions that their fathers had no fear of them. As we dig into this study, we find that the shed were usually depicted mostly by the Assyrians and Babylonians as a cross between a man and a bull. It had the body of a bull and the head of a man, and it is usually depicted with between 4 and 6 wings. Many people have pointed out that they look very similar to the biblical description of a cherubim. And this becomes really, really interesting as we proceed through this animal-human hybrid concept. So the first thing you want to take note of is the shed. It is known to the Assyrians and the Babylonians as the Shedu, the Shedu. So if you want to do some more research on that, I definitely encourage you to look into the shed and find out exactly how people were responding or worshiping these creatures. One of the things that is very common that we will find as we move throughout this in the ancient cultures, when people would worship these hybrid type creatures, one of the things that is really significant is human sacrifice. They were sacrificing humans to these. And even if we go into the mythologies and get outside of the Bible, we find the same thing. We find the same human sacrifice to these hybrid creatures. So that's the first one to be aware of, is the shed. The next creature to be aware of, we refer to it as, again, a devil or a demon. And the Bible actually uses this word several times. And several times it is translated differently. I'll say that. The word there is sayir, and it comes from the root word sa'ar, which means fear, to shiver, or to be horribly afraid of. This is translated in our Bible in some places as satyr, S-A-T-Y-R. If you are familiar with the word satyr, it is probably because you are familiar with Greek mythology. In Greek mythology, the satyrs were half human, half goat hybrids that were considered to be very sexual creatures. And we find a reference to the satyrs in the Bible in Leviticus chapter 17:7. We find them in Isaiah 13:21. But for now, let's look at the reference in Leviticus 17:7. It says, "And they shall no more offer their sacrifices unto devils, after whom they have gone a whoring." The word there is zana, which is also translated as fornication, prostitute, and several other words referring to the selling of oneself sexually in exchange for gain. And it says, "This shall be a statute forever unto them throughout their generations." And what's interesting here is, as I pointed out a second ago, in the Greek culture, these satyrs were very sexual creatures, and they were known to come after women for the purposes of sex. But here in Leviticus, we also have a reference to people going a whoring after them, or prostituting themselves to them or after them. And it seems weird at first when you first encounter this sort of stuff. The natural reaction and the traditional Christian church, well, I'll say the traditional mainstream church reaction is to write all this stuff off as mythology completely, or to say that, they're talking about idols, or, they come up with any explanation they can to avoid the subject at hand. But here in the Bible, we have a reference to people committing sexual acts in reference to satyrs. Now, in Isaiah 13:21, it actually leaves the word untranslated. In Isaiah 13:21, it reads as follows: "But wild beasts of the desert shall lie there, and their houses shall be full of doleful creatures, and owls shall dwell there, and satyrs shall dance there." So here we have a direct reference to the word satyr. And something else that is associated with satyrs is dancing and music. And that is from the Greek mythologies. And here in Isaiah, we have a reference to satyrs dancing. So there's something more to the satyr mythology than what many people give it credit for. So there are two of the four different types of hybrids that we're going to be dealing with in this study: satyrs and shed. And again, it is important to keep in mind that the Bible refers to these as demons or devils. They are unnatural creatures. And in a minute, once we get past the other two, we're going to talk about how these creatures possibly came to exist. Next, we're going to talk about the lion-human hybrid. I mentioned it in the beginning part of the study, the Sphinx in Egypt that is part lion, part human. But in the Bible, we actually encounter a similar creature in Moab. And this becomes really, really interesting because it's one of the places in Scripture that gives validation to the concept of a lion-human hybrid. Now, these lion-human hybrids, they pop up in India, they pop up in Egypt, and several other places around the world. But in the Bible, in 2 Samuel 23:20, we find one of David's men slaying a lion man. This is really crazy because right after that, it says that he went and slayed a lion also, so as to separate the fact that this was not an ordinary man and this was not just a lion. It was a lion-like man of Moab. And we see a lot of problems with the Moabites later on in the Bible. If you don't know who the Moabites are, they are descended from Lot and his older daughter. When Sodom, Gomorrah, and the other two cities were destroyed on the plain, they fled to Zoar. So God spared Zoar. He actually intended to destroy it, but out of Lot's request, he saved it. And so they fled and they ended up in the mountains, and the sisters thought that everybody had been wiped out, and so they wanted to preserve their father's seed, and so they slept with their father, and they ended up having the older daughter ended up having Moab. These lion-human hybrids are definitely found in the Bible, and again, you can find them in 2 Samuel 23:20. And that brings us to the final hybrid that we're going to deal with in this study. And this hybrid is very well known among lots of people. This is probably one of the most controversial hybrids. It's called a minotaur. It's a combination of a bull or a cow and a human. And this minotaur legend usually stems from, again, Greek mythology. And the reason I keep referring to Greek mythology is because most people are very familiar with it. And so when you do a study, it's easier to relate it to those things that people already are familiar with. And this bull-human hybrid, known as the Minotaur, actually does appear in the Bible. It appears in 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 7. The verse reads, "Then did Solomon build a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, in the hill that is before Jerusalem, and for Molech, the abomination of the children of Ammon." And so the Moabites and the Ammonites, they're actually brothers. They came about, the younger sister had a son who eventually becomes the Ammonites. The older sister eventually has the son Moab, who I just explained earlier. Both of them have children by their father Lot. They break into the Moabites and the Ammonites. Now the Bible refers to Chemosh and Molech as abominations. And so when you start to study these, you find out that some people believe that Chemosh and Molech were the same creature. And Molech is usually depicted as an owl, but there is a lesser known depiction of Molech, and that is of a cow-human hybrid. And again, they would sacrifice people to these hybrids in order to appease them or to keep them happy. So the concept of a minotaur is not just found in Greek mythology. This creature is also found in the Bible under the name of Molech or Chemosh. So now that we know which four animal-human hybrids are depicted in the Bible, we can kind of go ahead and validate some of those Greek myths. Now, I'm not saying accept all of the stories surrounding the Greek myths, but I'm saying that the Bible does provide a second source to these stories, saying that these creatures did exist. So now what we need to do is we need to go into exactly how these creatures came to be. What was going on at that time that led to these creatures popping up, these animal-human hybrids? So we're going to go ahead and answer that question now.